All right. Um, yeah, this is going to be a long one. So take a breath, settle in. Because what we're watching right now isn't a headline cycle. It's not a temporary spike in rhetoric. It's it's a structural shift. One of those moments where years from now, people will say, that's when it became obvious, and then quietly admit they didn't really want to see it at the time. World leaders in Europe are furious, like not annoyed, not diplomatic concern, furious. And they're done playing nice with Donald Trump. Done. And now they're saying they're ready for war. And in the original reporting, I'm riffing off here, the framing is basically, Donald, you're going to try to call our bluff. That's the line. That's the vibe. And the response from Europe is, call it. All right. Now we get into the first big piece, what the new head of MI6 had to say.
All continue to face the menace of an aggressive, expansionist and revisionist Russia seeking to subjugate Ukraine and harass NATO. I find it harrowing that hundreds of thousands have died, with the toll mounting every day because of Putin's historical distortions and his compromised desire for respect. He is dragging out negotiations and shifting the cost of war onto his own population. But Putin should be in no doubt. Our support is enduring. Alongside the grinding war, Russia is testing us in the grey zone with tactics that are just below the threshold of war. It's important to understand their attempts to bully, fearmonger and manipulate because it affects us all. I'm talking about cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, drones buzzing, airports and bases, aggressive activity in our seas above and below the waves, state-sponsored arson and sabotage, propaganda and influence operations that crack open and exploit fractures within societies. The export of chaos is a feature, not a bug, in this Russian approach to international engagement. And we should be ready for this to continue until Putin is forced to change his calculus. AI-powered robots and drones are brilliant for scaled manufacturing, but devastating on the battlefield. Discoveries that cure disease can also create new weapons. And as states race for tech supremacy, or as some algorithms become as powerful as states, those hyper-personalized tools could become a new vector for conflict and control.
Yeah, that's the intelligence angle. Not just war, but war plus system sabotage plus influence plus technology. They want to share what the United Kingdom's Air Chief Marshal, Sir Richard Knighton, said at a speech. He just gave warning people in Europe need to prepare now for the type of world war their grandparents were involved in.
The war in Ukraine and Russia's track record shows Putin's willingness to target neighbouring states, including their children and civilian populations. The Russian leadership has made clear that it wishes to challenge, limit, divide and ultimately destroy NATO. Deterrence, at least for NATO, has been working, but the threats and risks are growing. For 3 decades, many did not have to think about the armed forces. Peace was stable, conflict was distant, but that is no longer true. I will argue that the situation is more dangerous than I have known during my career, and the price of peace is rising. Our response needs to go beyond simply strengthening our armed forces. It needs a whole-of-nation response that builds our defence industrial capacity, grows the skills we need, harnesses the power of the institutions we will need in wartime, and increases the resilience of society and the infrastructure that supports it. But deterrence is hard to measure, and it's really hard to answer the question, how much is enough? In fact, it's almost impossible to answer that question except in hindsight. But if we get it wrong, the costs could be huge. I'm super clear that our armed forces are our first line of defence, and we need to be ready to fight and win. But the cost of getting it wrong is not just going to fall on those in uniform. The impact of failure will not be on some hopefully hypothetical future battlefield, but on the infrastructure and economy that underpins our broader national life and that of our allies. We have to prepare to protect ourselves from an array of real physical threats of growing sophistication.
Donbass is not Putin's endgame. Putin wants Donbass and wants eastern Ukraine handed to him. No, he can't take it over by military force. He's been too weak to do that. So then they're going to launch further plans and attacks. The EU knows what's up, and they're not going to fall for Putin and Trump's scheme.
We have to understand that Donbas is not Putin's endgame. If it gets Donbas, then the fortress is down, and then they definitely move on with taking the whole of Ukraine. And if Ukraine goes, then other regions are also in danger. We know this from the history, and we should learn from history.
Top minister in the EU for Foreign Affairs asks, can the EU provide the security guarantees it needs to stay here?
Have to keep in mind is that why countries want to be in NATO is because they don't want Russia to invade them, to attack them. And that's why, Sweden and Finland joined NATO. That's why the Baltic states joined NATO, to have this defense umbrella, really. Now, if this is not in question, or this is out of the question, then we need to see what are the security guarantees that are tangible. They can't be, papers or promises. They have to be, real troops, real capabilities, so that Ukraine is able to defend itself.
Let me share what a Ukrainian member of parliament, Kira Rudik, had to say. The point she makes is absolutely perfect. And they shout out these powerful female leaders. They need much more powerful female leaders like this, and the men should step aside. Frankly, they say, if we had more leaders like this, the world would be a better place. That's just their humble opinion.
I think over the last, 6 months, we have heard so many things about different peace plans, about different proposals. However, everybody's trying to dance around the complicated question that is not answered. And the question is, who or what will make sure that Putin would not attack us again? Yeah. There is no solution to that we have heard just yet. We have heard some things about security guarantees from the United States, but I don't think that any of that is finalized. And other than that, what these discussions are about, we do not see that President Trump, who is leading these attempts to negotiate something, we do not see that he has gotten anything from Putin. So I seriously...
And he might not even go to the peace talks.
Yeah, so this is how does he think that Putin will stop?
And then, of course, I showed you this clip yesterday, and here is Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, saying the Pax Americana is over. This idea of America and Europe side by side is done. America can't be trusted.
I will come back to this point shortly in the context of foreign and security policy. But, dear friends, the decades of Pax Americana are largely over for us in Europe and indeed for us in Germany. It's not the same as we once knew it, and no amount of nostalgia will help, and I'd be one of the last who wouldn't gladly give in to such nostalgia. But it's no use. That's how it is. The Americans are now very, very firmly asserting their own interests, and that can only mean one answer, that we must now also assert our own interests. And my dear friends, we are not nearly as weak. We are not nearly as insignificant.
There was another clip of Merz talking about Russia getting ready for World War II. It doesn't just end at Ukraine. So the defense of Ukraine is important to protect Ukraine. But Ukraine is Europe.
Das ist ein Angriffskrieg. This is a war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine. It is against Europe. And if Ukraine falls, then he will not stop. Just as in 1938, the Sudetenland was not enough. Putin will not stop. And for anyone who still genuinely believes today that they have had enough of this, they should please meticulously examine his strategies, his official papers, his public speeches, and all of his appearances.
Trump again, and stacks a lot of claims in one run. Donald Trump, during a press conference yesterday in the Oval Office, attacked Rob Reiner and Reiner's wife, Michelle, after they were murdered, with the main suspect being their son, who suffered from drug addiction.
Security guarantee is offered. What incentive is there for Ukraine to give up any sort of territory?
Well, look, you have, they've already lost the territory, to be honest. I mean, the territory is lost. But in terms of security guarantee, we're working with Europe on it. Europe would be a big part of that. And we're working on the security guarantees so the war doesn't start up again. We don't want to have a war start up again. You know, as I said, with Thailand and Cambodia, two people I get along with great. And I dealt with them and I called them and I said, look, fellas, you got to relax. You got to take it easy. They lost. You know, they started the war again. And I got it ended.
The German foreign minister has been discussing these ongoing talks that have been happening in Berlin. There have been negotiations in Berlin where Trump's not there, but he sent his envoy, Witkoff, and Witkoff sent his son-in-law, Kushner. By the way, Kushner's real estate Trump Tower project in Belgrade, Serbia, has blown up as cabinet members have been arrested due to corruption there. And Kushner's private equity company, Affinity, funded by money from the Saudis and the Emiratis, the UAE, and Qatar, they had to shut down their building project in Belgrade. The German foreign minister said the following about the Trump regime's negotiating positions. They say, the foreign minister said Zelensky's meeting with Witkoff on Sunday made clear also on Monday that the U.S. delegation had obviously coordinated its position with Moscow beforehand. And the foreign minister said Sunday's talks were substantial, but they'll only know at the end of the week how much real progress is being made. Zelensky says yesterday they had their first meeting with Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner, as well as with the U.S. team. Prior to that, teams held the relevant meetings. It is very important that their counterparts from the United States of America heard all details regarding the war. If these meetings had taken place earlier, progress would have been even greater. But he is grateful that they truly work very well together. He says there were some things that, in his view, are destructive and would definitely not help. It is important that they are no longer present in the new versions of the documents. This matters because dignity matters. Zelensky is referring to giving up eastern Ukraine, preventing Ukraine from joining the European Union or NATO, and other attacks on Ukrainian sovereignty being pushed by Russia. Then Zelensky writes, of course, they have different positions with Russia regarding territories. This must be acknowledged and discussed openly. He believes the American side, acting as mediator, will propose various steps to try to find at least some form of consensus. They will do everything to find clear answers to questions about security guarantees, territories, and money as compensation for Ukraine to rebuild. It is necessary to understand the source of this funding. He says they are discussing security guarantees, and before taking any steps on the battlefield, both the military and the civilian population must have a clear understanding of what the security guarantees will be. This is very important. They are working on putting all of this on paper right now, and there is progress. The details developed by the military part looks quite solid, even though it is only a first draft. In other words, they don't trust the United States here. They need real security guarantees with teeth. And you're not going to bully them and strip away their dignity. European leaders have published what some of these security guarantees can look like for Ukraine in 6 points. And I'm going to keep all 6 exactly. Permanent military support. Ukraine maintains a powerful army up to 800,000 troops in peacetime. Multinational forces led by Europe within the coalition of the willing, with U.S. support forces, will be created to restore Ukraine's armed forces, protect the skies, and ensure maritime security. Ceasefire monitoring. The monitoring mechanism will be led by the United States with international partners. Legally binding security guarantees. Any new attack on Ukraine will automatically trigger a response. Military, intelligence, economic and diplomatic reconstruction and funding. Frozen Russian assets in the EU will remain blocked. Path to EU. Europe officially confirms its support for Ukraine's accession to the European Union as a cornerstone for long-term security. All right, we're at the end here. And the original ends with a call to action. And you said, don't omit anything. So I'm keeping it.